Syria is not just another part of the world of Islam. From an Islamic eschatological perspective, Syria is at the heart, the very heart of the end of history. There are three main actors at the end of history in Islamic eschatology. The most important of them all is the return of Jesus, the Son of Mary, the true Messiah. And then there is another figure in the end of history who seeks to impersonate the true Messiah, and he is the false Messiah. The Christians call him the Antichrist, and Nabi Muhammad, Allah's blessing be upon him, called him Al-Masih al-Dajjal, or Dajjal, the false Messiah. And the third important figure in Islamic eschatology at the end of history is the Imam, or the Prince. In Christian theology is known as the Prince, or Imam al-Mahdi. And these three main actors of the end of history are all going to be simultaneously present in Damascus. Imam al-Mahdi will already be there. Dajjal will come to attack him. And at that time, when Dajjal is ready for the confrontation with the Imam, the Son of Mary returns. And they all will be in Damascus. And so Syria is located at the very heart of the end of history, or eschatology. It is a country of far more than just passing importance. What happens in Syria is of paramount importance to the Christian world and to the Muslim world, because these are the two worlds that believe in the true Messiah. These are the two worlds which await the return of the true Messiah. These are the two worlds who believe in the Antichrist, the Christian and the Muslim. They who lust to rule the world, to stamp their bloody feet on the stage of the world, and to establish their political and economic and monetary dominion over mankind on behalf of the State of Israel, came up with a devilish plan to take control of the entire territory around Israel. And they called it, they usually coin these nice and lovely terms, they call it the Arab Spring. But it was a cover for them to take control of Libya. They needed control over Libya, not only because Gaddafi was offering a challenge to their monetary dominion with his views on gold, but because Israel needs to expand her territory in order to fulfill the biblical frontiers of the Holy Land, to encompass the biblical frontiers of the Holy Land, which is from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. If Israel is to take the eastern delta of Egypt, it cannot be simply with aerial bombardment. You need a land war. And Egypt has about 80 million people. It's going to be a messy affair. In order for them to be able to grab that part of Egypt, which is the eastern delta, they need to invade Egypt from the east and from the west. That's why they needed Libya. And these fools with a capital F with their bogus jihad, who take weapons from the CIA and take money from the CIA to launch what they call a jihad or holy war, are fools with a capital F. Yes. They're rubbish. And that's what they did. They fought Israel's war for Israel. And now today NATO is in control of Libya. They wanted not only Libya, they wanted Syria. Syria more than Libya. They got Libya, so now Egypt's goose is cooked. Whenever they're ready, they'll be able to attack Egypt from east and from west and bombard Egypt from the Mediterranean Sea. And then you have the southern Sudan out there and Ethiopia to help you along from the south. So Egypt is surrounded, and Egypt's goose is cooked now, thanks to this bogus jihad. But how to get Syria? They were able to get Libya because, for reasons far more mysterious that I can achieve in my innocent ken, Russia decided to abandon Libya. Russia chose to throw Libya to the dogs. Why did Russia do that? You've got to ask Russia. I don't know. The Security Council of the United Nations, and you are there, and you are a permanent member. You have responsibility. You'll have to answer on Judgment Day. You know that if you do not give your veto, you know what's going to happen. You can't hide behind abstaining from the vote. Your abstention from the vote meant that Libya was gone. So you will have to answer on Judgment Day. And that's what Russia did. I don't know why Russia acted in this way, but now Libya is gone. If Russia had vetoed the resolution, then the Libyan armed forces would still have been there today, struggling against this bogus jihad. It was when NATO was able to bomb the daylights out of Libya, as they bombed the daylights out of Belgrade once upon a time. I hope the Serbian people never forget that. That was when they were able to get Libya. But the big prize was Syria. And the same thing that they did with Libya, they did with Syria. An armed insurrection, not a spontaneous uprising. No. This was a planned, armed insurrection, funded and armed by them to take over a country. They call it color revolutions. No, you're taking over a country and you're doing it the dirty way, unworthy of a people who say you are Christians. Yes, they say they're Christians. I say no, they're not Christian, they're barbarians. When I want to find a Christian, I'll come to Orthodox Christianity. You're barbarians, because this is how you take over a country? By paying people, armed mercenaries to come and fight, providing the weapons and denying that you are part of it. This is what they did in Syria. This is what they're still doing in Syria. They did it with al-Nusra, they did it with the Free Syrian Army, and now their last baby is ISIS, or the Islamic State. The CIA. It's a CIA jihad in Syria. And because Russia has threatened to veto any resolution for a no-fly zone, that's why Assad has survived so far. If they had brought forward a resolution to the Security Council for a no-fly zone, and if Russia had abstained, as Russia did on Libya, Assad would be gone. Finish. I am not a supporter of any government in the world of Islam. No. But I admire those who stand up against the oppressor. And in this case, the biggest oppressor of all is Israel. I hope and I pray that I'll continue to have the freedom to speak these words that I've just spoken. That the biggest oppressor of all is Israel. And the Syrian government has been standing up to the oppressor. The Libyan government was standing up to the oppressor. And in religion has zero tolerance for oppression. If you are following the religious way of life, you have to be standing with the oppressed and not with the oppressor. The Ottoman Empire was an oppressor. Those who fought against the Ottoman Empire at Kosovo were the oppressed. If you join the religion of Islam and you become a Muslim, whose side would you be on? The oppressor or the oppressed? You see? So in Syria, you have a government which was standing up to the oppressor. And now you launch a jihad in Syria, and you say that this is an authentic jihad against a government standing up against the oppressor. Why didn't you launch the jihad in Saudi Arabia, where you have a government which is in the hand and in the glove of the oppressor, supporting the oppressor? Why didn't you do it there? Why didn't you do it in Jordan, where you have a government that's a client state of the oppressor? Why do you do it in Syria? Why do it in Libya? I'm not a fool. You have done it in Syria and you've done it in Libya because you're acting on behalf of the oppressor, to get rid of governments which are standing up to the oppressor. And now we have reached that moment in history where a Christian people have stood up to support the government of Syria and to save Syria from becoming another Libya. And we are proud, very proud of Christian Russia. Christian Russia has now entered into Syria militarily, and I don't think it is possible for Christian Russia to back out of Syria. No. And so the world is going to witness now a confrontation between the oppressor and the champions of the oppressed. It's going to be nuclear war. And we are not afraid to die. And that's all I have to say. We are not afraid to die. Perspective again is that of Islamic eschatology. And as a consequence, I must direct attention to the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, who prophesied an end-time conquest of Constantinople. And that end-time conquest of Constantinople comes after the great war that the Christians call Armageddon and the Muslims call the Malhama. And if anyone believes that the Armageddon or the Malhama has already occurred, he should buy a one-way ticket to the moon. No, it has not as yet occurred. It's still to come. And the conquest of Constantinople takes place after that. So Sultan Muhammad Fatih's conquest of Constantinople in 1452 or 53 is not the fulfillment of the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad. The Turkish people, the Bosnian people, the people of Albania and Kosovo and Macedonia and others who have been brainwashed into believing that that is the fulfillment of the prophecy, I tell you, you got homework to do because you've been misled. I ask myself, why would this occur in the end time? What strategic importance can there be in a conquest of Constantinople, prophesied not only in Islamic eschatology but also in Christian eschatology? And Stephen, my answer is, and this is my answer, you don't have to agree with me, is that a conquest of Constantinople has only one military importance. And that is that it would free the Bosphorus and the Straits of Dardanelles for the Russian Navy. At this time, it's a NATO-controlled waterway. But a conquest of Constantinople would break the back of NATO. And as a consequence, the Russian Navy would be able to pass through to the Mediterranean. That is the only military significance I can see. Why would a navy be so important? Perhaps in a post-nuclear world, we will not have any more aircraft. And that wars in a post-nuclear world will be fought on the land and in the sea. If this is going to be the reason for the conquest of Constantinople, then Crimea assumes an importance unparalleled. Because Crimea is the warm water port of the Russian Navy. My eschatological analysis is that the mastermind who wants to rule the world from Jerusalem already knew this. And so he used, and this will come out in my subsequent lectures on Gog and Magog, he used Gog and Magog to empower the Ottoman Empire with a power that could not be destroyed by any Christian army. So when Orthodox Christianity met the Ottoman Empire in the Battle of Kosovo, there was no way at all that the Christian army could ever have been successful. None. Because you're fighting Gog and Magog. You're not fighting Islam. It was as a consequence of the success of the Ottoman armies that the Tatar were sent to Crimea. And eventually, the Ottoman Empire took Crimea. Ottoman control over Crimea is part of eschatology. It is meant to prepare the way to deny Russia the capacity to pose anything, any naval threat in the end time. When Russia defeated the Ottoman Empire and took Crimea, it meant that there was an obstacle in the way. And they had to devise ways and means to try to get Russia out of Crimea. For 200 to 300 years, they could not do it. And Russia remained a naval power with a naval base in Crimea. And then they brought about the Crimean War, in which it was the last great war fought before modern weapons came. The last great war. And in that war, they gave everything that they could give to defeat Russia, to deny Russia Crimea. And they succeeded, eventually. Russia paid a terrible price, the number of people who died. The Russians fought and fought valiantly and courageously, but eventually they had to surrender. And the terms of the surrender, I think the treaty was in Paris, was that Crimea would remain under Russian sovereignty but would be demilitarized. Russia denied Crimea as a naval base, which is what they wanted. But they planned their plan, and the Lord God plans his plans, and I think it was within 7 or 9 years, and Russia was able to turn the tables and get back Crimea as a naval port. So then they had to devise yet another scheme to deny Russia Crimea. And that scheme was the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, and the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union came into being, then Ukraine was born, There was no Ukraine before. And in 1953, 53 or 54, 6 years after Israel was born, Nikita Khrushchev suddenly, mysteriously, ominously mysteriously, announced that Crimea was going to be given to Ukraine. He never consulted the Russian people. He never got their permission. He never consulted the people of Crimea. He never got their permission because he was acting on behalf of Dajjal. And once Crimea was given to Ukraine, the next step was to dismember the Soviet Union, and Crimea would emerge as an independent state. Russia would now have a treaty with Crimea limiting its use of the naval base. Yes, Ukraine would now become an independent state, and Ukraine would have a treaty with Russia limiting the use of the naval base. And then the next step after that would be, with Ukraine as an independent state, for Ukraine to become a member of NATO, and then Russia's goose is cooked. If Ukraine becomes a member of NATO and Crimea belongs to Ukraine, Russia's goose is cooked. But they planned their plan, and the Lord God planned his plans. And when they had the bogus color revolution in Kiev, within 2 weeks, Crimea was back where it belonged in the first place, to Russia. As soon as Russia regained Crimea, Russia is a nuclear power. Russia is able to project nuclear power around the Black Sea. And the geostrategic implications were enormous. And so this is why I've said the Zionist movement suffered its greatest loss in its entire history. From the day the Zionist movement was established in Basel in 1897 to this day, the greatest loss that the Zionist movement has ever suffered was the loss of Crimea. And so the events in Ukraine are to be understood from our eschatological perspective as directed primarily to the importance of Crimea and Russia's role in the end times to be the naval power in a post-nuclear world. Now that Russia has regained Crimea, the pieces are already in place, the nuclear war is coming, and we know what's going to happen after that. Don't think it's necessary for us to go back to repeat what are the causes for this exodus of refugees. It's well known. Amongst them is the armed insurrection in Syria. Amongst them is the increasing poverty to the state of destitution to which people are being reduced because of this bogus and fraudulent monetary system. What is more important is for the whole world to be honest and to recognize that many of these people have left their homes, the comfort of their homes, the places where their families are located, their relatives are located, left behind those who are too old to migrate. And it must be very painful to leave the elderly behind. and are fleeing for their lives because of fear. There are those who are economic migrants, yes, but most of those from Syria are fleeing because of fear. Fear of ISIS, fear of the Islamic State, which is brutal, which has committed acts of brutality that are meant to send a message of fear and terror into the hearts of the people. That's why they are fleeing. And at this time, when after almost 1 year has passed, that a man named Barack Obama has been bombing the daylights out of ISIS, that's what he told me he's doing, and Holland and France and Britain and all the others, they're bombing the daylights out of ISIS for a whole year now, and yet ISIS is able to not only survive and grow stronger thanks to all the bombing from Washington, but ISIS is able to increase its terror, its psychological warfare. I say that intelligent people, sensible people would welcome Russia's intervention. Sensible and intelligent people who have not been brainwashed by CNN and company would welcome Russia's intervention to see whether they could succeed where the others have failed and failed miserably, to stop this terror. If Russia can be successful in removing this cause of terror in the hearts of people, then it should not be difficult for the German people to understand and to anticipate that the people who fled their homes would want to go back home. And Germany would not have to keep 1 million refugees forever. The German people, therefore, I can't, of course, expect the German government to understand. They're beyond understanding, but the German people will understand that if the Russians are successful in the military intervention, it will solve Germany's problem. It will solve the problem of all of Europe, which is inundated with refugees, because these people will much prefer to go back home if security can be restored and ISIS can be removed. And so I would like to believe that sensible and intelligent people would not only welcome Russia's intervention, but would hope and pray that Russia would be successful. Number one, I don't think that Russia wants nuclear war. Number two, I don't think that NATO wants nuclear war. And so both of these nuclear powers, I believe, would try to ensure that they don't get into each other's way in such a way as would provoke nuclear war. Russia indeed called for talks with the United States in order to avoid such a clash that could lead to nuclear war. But there are those who do want nuclear war. They lust for nuclear war. The reason why they want nuclear war is because nuclear war would eliminate these two nuclear powers. Nuclear war will not only eliminate these two main actors on the stage of the world, the Russian alliance and the American alliance, but nuclear war will essentially devastate modern Western civilization. There'll be nothing left of North America and nothing left of Europe. Nobody would want to live in that part of the world, really, after nuclear war. One nuclear weapon was dropped on Hiroshima, and 300,000 people were killed. and so too in Nagasaki. Today's nuclear weapons are 1,000 times more powerful than that. Can you imagine what is going to be the state of Europe and North America when thousands of nuclear weapons explode? Because once the nuclear war starts, there's nothing that can stop it until it reaches its climax with all nuclear weapons used. It's going to be a fight to the finish. And there are those who want nuclear war. How will they get nuclear war? The same way they got 9/11. That's right, with a false flag. I expect it will be the mother of all false flags. So something that will be an attack on the Russian troops and blame the Americans, an attack on NATO and blame the Russians. They are masters of that. They're masters of the art of deception, the Israeli Mossad. When that nuclear war does take place, of course, most of mankind would die. What is left, the rump of the world, would be manageable for Israel to succeed the United States and for Pax Judaica to replace Pax Americana. And when Pax Judaica replaces Pax Americana, only then can a man stand up in Jerusalem and declare, I am the Messiah. But you and I, the Orthodox Christian and the Muslim, would know he's not going to be the Messiah. He's going to be the false Messiah, the Antichrist. The true Messiah, of course, being the son of the Virgin Mary. So they want nuclear war. And I'm afraid that they will get nuclear war because our prophet has prophesied it. He said that there'll be a war in which 99 out of every 100 of the combatants will be killed. That is in Sahih Bukhari, yes.